I mean, I'm looking at this node on my desk. It's a Raspberry Pi. It's super small. It's a little thing, and it performs all of the transaction validation and propagation functions that a giant bank does. And it's this
Right.
little thing. It doesn't do everything my bank does. It doesn't do the customer service. It doesn't create loans for me, all this other stuff. But some of the basic function of validating the transaction and broadcasting them to the network, it does. And it's a $200 box, and it's running on my desk. And we only need, I mean, the Bitcoin network could function with not too many of these, a couple.
Yeah.
But everyone can run one. It's the Jeff Booth thesis. Like, I'm staring at it. I look at this little box with its little red light, and I'm like, this replaces 70,000 employees at a giant commercial bank.
It is. Bitcoin is the automaticity of money, right?
Yeah.
Or perhaps even of, I don't know, it's something even deeper than money in a way, because it is an institution in and unto itself. So it's kind of combined the concept, this ephemeral concept of money we've ascribed to different commodities or assets. And it's combined the social institution we have used to scale cooperation and trust. And it's really like, it's combined that into one implementation, which is, it's just so hard to put words to it almost. What is this thing?
It has to be international too. Like a lot of economic writing separates the concept of like the domestic economy from the international economy. That's a false.
Right.
There is one economy,
one species, one planet.
There's one economy in the world, and it's international. There isn't a domestic, and the concept of like thinking of your local country's economy as separate from the rest of the world is in fact an outgrowth of these fiat monies competing against each other.
Exactly.
Because the creation of a fiat money that is separate and not convertible at a predefined ratio is an attempt to isolate your local economy from the rest of the world. But that is an impossibility. There's one economy on the world, and it's the world economy. I feel like it's worth getting into the really fine points of like, well, how did this work? Like, we talk about gold was a commitment mechanism, but there was money that existed on top of it. I feel like it's actually really interesting and worth it to get into like the nitty gritty of, well, how did that balance out the economic forces between countries? And the reason why it's worth it is not just for its own sake, because it will give, it allows people to really understand why central banks were created and what the interest rate tool was invented for. I mean, we talked about this a little bit, but like the protocol of the interest rate tool, it is embedded in the gold standard, and how the gold standard worked on like on a granular level. So let's get into that. Let's get into the nitty gritty of the exchange standard. And the exchange standard is different from, there's actually sort of three flavors of the gold standard. There's the gold standard where coins are issued as money, notes are issued as money, they're interchangeable, and any participant in the economy can walk into any bank or any depository institution and exchange their fiduciary media for gold. That's the gold standard. That is the coin standard. That's the gold standard. The bullion standard is, okay, you can't just exchange your notes for coins because we don't make them. But if you have enough cash, you can get one of these 400-ounce bullion bars. That was a neutered version of the gold standard. And just the fact is that not everybody had enough money to buy bullion,
right,
as it's called. They couldn't get just like a coin, a dollar, a pound. So
Just
the
centralizing,
ex-
basically.
yeah, it was the beginning of the centralizing, and the exchange standard was you might hold credits in foreign money, and you might hold gold, you might hold both. So you're using foreign exchange as part of your country's reserves, and you're also using metal. So, but there are a few key attributes of this system that were really important to make it work. Now, one is total freedom of trade and minimal or no tariffs, free movement of capital. And free movement of capital really came from the fact that under the gold standard, you could bring gold and to any for coinage and melt it down and have it made into coins pretty much free of charge. So like gold was just the money that you didn't have to have the local currency. You could have the raw metal, or you could mine it yourself. You could be a miner, but money really was this universal substance on an atomic level that was just as good in one place as it was in another. And what that led to was there was really a lack of arbitrage. If you think about it, if all currencies are pegged, then there's no currency arbitrage. I'm going to read a quote from the book. Under the traditional gold standard, the short-term capital flow governed by interest rate and foreign exchange arbitrage was, as a rule, the regulator of the balance of payments, with gold movements serving as the ultimate balancing items. The solidarity of money markets, as it was called at the time, was maintained by a narrow circle of highly skilled professionals, and there was scant incentive for the public to speculate in gold or foreign exchange when the fluctuations were confined within the range of this thing they called the gold points. Short-term interest rate differentials between countries didn't attract any more than a tiny fraction of each country's liquid resources. So there wasn't just a lot of betting on which way is the currency going to go. All currencies were fixed. And there is a corollary to this rule. There's a huge however, but before we get to that however, we have to go even like a little bit further into exactly how the exchange standard worked and the gold standard worked. So like by 1914, the gold standard had spread to these 49 countries, and there was universally accepted was the idea that there was an expectation of a permanent exchange rate stability. Gold could be minted and melted for private use at no cost to the owner. And there was a full freedom of circulation inside and outside of each country. And all non-gold money was redeemable in gold. So like any type of paper.